I'm Mrs. Dion. Today we're going to be discussing the cell cycle. First, the question, do cells divide or do they just get bigger and bigger? And the answer to that is they divide. They cannot just grow larger because as the cell gets larger and larger, it just can't get enough nutrients in to feed itself because it's just too big. And there's also just not enough DNA to support one big cell. It just can't give instructions to one huge cell. So the point is that cells divide. So that's what really we're discussing today when we say cell cycle. And just showing how one cell will turn into two identical cells. These are some reasons why we need to make new cells. One is growth. You need to add cells as you grow from an infant and get larger. You're adding more cells to the body. Replace worn out cells that are just old and the DNA is starting to make mistakes and that need to be replaced. And also repair. If you cut yourself, if you break a bone, you need to repair that with new cells. So just showing repair a broken bone and then growth, getting larger are reasons why we need new cells. Chromosomes will be key here. Chromosomes are really just DNA. They're found in the nucleus of the cell. Like I said, they are DNA. They must be copied exactly correct when the cell divides. That's the main thing that we need to focus on when we discuss the cell cycle and mitosis, is making sure that DNA is copied correctly so there aren't mutations and mistakes in the new cells. Here's what a chromosome kind of looks like, sort of like an X, and inside of the chromosome there's scrunched up DNA. The cell cycle is the growing of a cell and the dividing. So we need to focus on what happens, and especially what happens with the chromosomes. The first step we'll discuss is called interphase, and this is really an in-between time between the cell actually dividing. It's the longest portion of what we call the cell cycle. At any given time, most of our cells are in this phase where they're not actually dividing, but they are getting ready to divide. There's 3 stages of interphase. G1 is where the cell is actually growing. S is where the DNA is copied because eventually you'll make 2 cells, so you need a copy for the new cell. And then G2 is where the organelles, things like the mitochondria, will be copied to make enough for the new cell. Mitosis is another stage, so we'll have interphase and then mitosis. Mitosis is the actual dividing of the cell. These will be the 4 steps, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, that we will go through of how the step will actually divide during mitosis. Prophase is the longest stage of mitosis. This right here is a chromosome. During prophase, the chromosomes actually become visible and you could see them. This little thing connecting the chromosomes is called a centromere, and these are actually called sister chromatids because they're identical copies of one another. During prophase, what you have happening is a structure called the nucleolus disappears. The nucleus kind of breaks down and the nuclear envelope disappears. And these little structures called centrioles will separate to either end of the cell. This is kind of what prophase looks like. These would be your centrioles. This is the spindle. These structures right here are the chromosomes where you can actually see them, and the nuclear envelope is starting to break down. The next step is metaphase. This is the shortest stage of mitosis. What happens here is the chromosomes really line up in the middle and they'll be attached to the spindle. It looks something like this. The chromosomes are now lined up across the middle. These fibers going across are the spindle, and these structures right here are the centrioles. Step 3 is anaphase. This is where the centromeres holding the chromosomes together will separate and the spindle starts to get shorter. It looks something like this, where the chromosomes that were in the middle are now being pulled to either end of the cell. You still have your centrioles, the spindle, and the chromosomes, but the spindle is getting shorter. Next we have telophase. This is where the cell starts to kind of come together again and look like it did in the beginning of mitosis. The nuclear envelope starts to reform. It looks more like this, where now you're starting to get a separation here. The nuclear envelope is coming back. Our chromosomes, notice we have 4 here and 4 here in each cell. And then lastly, cytokinesis is where the cells actually break into two, and you have two identical cells that have formed from the one. So in cytokinesis, this portion will actually start to break apart from each other, and you'll end up with two new cells. And if everything has gone correctly, the chromosome numbers should be the same in each of those new cells, and the DNA should be exactly the same. And if that's what we want, we don't want to have any missing chromosomes or mistakes in the DNA. And that concludes our discussion on cell cycle.